History is not written by the loudest people in the room. It's written by the ones everyone underestimated. That single truth has quietly shaped the rise and fall of more lives than war, money, or luck ever could. The biggest disasters rarely begin with aggression. They begin with misjudgment. Someone looks at calm and calls it weakness. Someone sees patience and assumes fear. Someone mistakes discipline for submission. And that error sits there, harmless at first, smiling politely, until it starts charging interest. Here's a fact people don't like admitting. Most personal downfalls aren't caused by enemies who are stronger. They're caused by enemies who were careless. History, psychology, and even court records show the same pattern. The people who cause the most damage are rarely the loud rebels. They're the composed ones who wait, observe, and don't announce transitions. The ones who don't argue when disrespected because they're already updating their mental files. By the time the disrespecter feels confident, the ground underneath them is already shifting. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Some people don't lose because karma is mystical or poetic. They lose because they kept poking someone who had nothing to prove and everything to remember. They thought consequences came with sirens and warning labels. Turns out, consequences prefer stealth. They don't kick the door in. They change the locks quietly and let you realize it too late. There's also a strange comedy in how this always plays out. The person doing the damage usually feels brilliant while doing it. Smug even. Confident enough to narrate their own victory in real time. Meanwhile, the one being underestimated is calmly upgrading their boundaries, detaching emotionally, and mentally filing the situation under resolved. No shouting, no dramatic exit, just a silent reclassification of someone from important to irrelevant, which, if we're being honest, hurts far more than a punch ever could. This is not a story about revenge fantasies or dramatic confrontations. It's about what happens when someone confuses access with entitlement, patience with permission, and kindness with a lack of options. It's about the quiet moment when a person realizes far too late that making the wrong enemy wasn't bold. It was historical self-sabotage. Number one, they mistook your restraint for weakness, and that miscalculation ruins empires. Restraint has a way of confusing people who live off noise. When you don't react the way they expect, they start filling in the blanks with their own ego. They assume you're scared, unsure, or lacking options. They read your calm as surrender and your patience as hesitation. What they never stop to consider is that restraint is often a decision, not a limitation. It's what people use when they already know how much damage they're capable of causing and choose not to waste it. You didn't stay quiet because you couldn't speak. You stayed quiet because you were watching. You were letting patterns reveal themselves, letting intentions get sloppy, letting masks slip. While they were getting comfortable disrespecting you, you were learning exactly who they were when they thought they were winning. That kind of information is priceless, and it only comes when you don't interrupt people with reactions. History is full of collapses that started this way. Someone underestimated a composed opponent and pushed too far, too often. They crossed lines thinking nothing would happen because nothing had happened yet. They forgot that patience doesn't mean absence of limits. It means the limit just hasn't been reached. When it is, the response isn't loud or emotional. It's clean, decisive, and final. The dangerous part of restraint is that it looks boring. There's no drama, no warning shots, no heated speeches. So people keep testing it like a loose wire, assuming it's dead because it hasn't shocked them yet. What they don't realize is that restraint stores energy. Every ignored insult, every swallowed reaction, every calm response is pressure being contained. When that pressure is finally released, it doesn't explode randomly. It moves with direction. By the time they realize your calm was never fear, the situation has already shifted. Access is gone, trust is gone, influence is gone. They're left trying to argue with a version of you that no longer exists. And that's how empires fall, not from sudden attacks, but from one arrogant assumption made against someone who knew exactly when to stay still and when to move. Number 2, they thought access to you was permanent, which is the arrogance that precedes collapse. Most people operate like access is a given, like your time, attention, and energy exist solely for their convenience. They forget that these things are earned, maintained, and just as easily withdrawn. They speak as if you owe them patience, loyalty, or explanations, without ever realizing that all of it has limits, limits you define. When someone treats your presence like a constant, they are quietly testing your boundaries, not understanding that boundaries are invisible until crossed. And when they cross them, the fall isn't dramatic, it's inevitable. People rarely notice how valuable access actually is until it's gone. They take your patience for granted, your guidance as default, and your trust as permanent. While they're comfortable assuming you'll always be available, you're quietly observing, cataloging behavior, and reassessing priorities. You're not being petty, you're being strategic. You're weighing who deserves your attention and who is just inflating their own sense of importance by existing in your orbit. The arrogance of thinking someone's access is permanent comes from ego, ignorance, or both. They assume loyalty is automatic and underestimate the intelligence of someone who has already learned to function independently. They fail to understand that the person they rely on could choose tomorrow to exist in a completely separate sphere, unaffected by their manipulation or expectations. And when that choice is exercised, it's not revenge, it's simply recalibration, removing unnecessary friction and protecting energy that was once wasted. What makes this deadly is that withdrawal is subtle. There's no screaming, no dramatic confrontation, no announcement, just a quiet reallocation of focus. And suddenly, the people who treated your presence as permanent realize they were never essential. They were optional. They discover the hard way that access is never owed, only granted, and revoking it is a lesson most of them will never forget. That arrogance, that assumption, becomes their undoing. The gap between expectation and reality doesn't just sting, it reshapes the hierarchy they thought they controlled. They were comfortable taking you for granted. Now they're learning that what they assumed was theirs to use was always under your command. Number 3, they underestimated how dangerous self-awareness is when paired with memory. Self-awareness is quiet, invisible, and easily mistaken for compliance. People see it and assume you're unaware, that you're drifting, that your mind isn't cataloging every detail, every slight, every misstep. They fail to realize that self-awareness is a radar, and when it's combined with memory, it becomes a weapon they can't see coming. Every insult, every betrayal, every miscalculation they commit is stored, indexed, and weighed. Not with emotion, not with haste, but with precision. They think time erases mistakes, but for someone who is self-aware, time sharpens them. When you remember, you gain leverage, not the loud, threatening kind, but the kind that makes people overreach, underestimate, and ultimately fail themselves. Every act of carelessness they commit becomes a chapter in a growing dossier. It's invisible until it's executed against them, and by then they can't argue, negotiate, or erase the record. They believed that forgetting was automatic, that memory fades, that wounds dull. They were wrong. Memory paired with awareness doesn't just recall, it anticipates. It sees patterns, predicts behavior, and positions the observer steps ahead, while the offender still thinks they're in control. That combination is terrifying, because it doesn't show itself immediately. There's no warning. There's no foreshadowing. It doesn't scream or threaten. It waits, and when it acts, it's surgical. People who misjudged you suddenly find that the ground has shifted under them, that their moves were mapped out long before they made them, and that consequences are simply the natural outcome of ignoring the intelligence they failed to respect. Underestimating someone who is self-aware and has a sharp memory is the fastest way to accelerate their own downfall. You can lie, manipulate, or strategize all you want, but if the other person remembers everything and understands themselves, your actions become predictable, your schemes transparent, and your arrogance your undoing. It's not personal, it's math. Patterns repeat, and awareness ensures that when the time comes, history doesn't just repeat itself. It punishes those foolish enough to assume they're smarter than the one quietly observing. Number 4, they assumed you needed them emotionally, not realizing you outgrew survival mode years ago. People often make the fatal mistake of thinking everyone depends on them. They believe emotional access equals power, that being needed is the same as being indispensable. They assume your stability, confidence, or presence is a product of them, when in reality it's a product of your own evolution. You didn't just wake up one day immune to manipulation or petty demands. You built yourself while the world tried to chip away at you. You survived, not by leaning on others, but by learning how to stand, rebuild, and thrive alone. When someone underestimates that, they expose their arrogance. They act like you're tethered to their approval, as if validation and understanding are currencies you still need. The truth is, you've already banked your own worth. You've already learned to weather storms without anchors. They confuse their presence with necessity, not realizing you could thrive without them and still laugh quietly at how wrong they were. The more they try to assert importance over you, the more invisible their leverage becomes. There's also a danger in assuming that emotional influence is permanent. They forget that people who have outgrown survival mode have a different relationship with attachment. They feel yes, but selectively. They trust yes, but carefully. Their focus is not on clinging or appeasing. They've mastered detachment from what no longer serves them. Someone who believed you would crumble without them will soon face the jarring reality that you are not just standing, you are advancing, expanding, evolving, and entirely unaffected by the very people who thought they mattered. That kind of miscalculation is more than arrogance. It's fatal. They confuse dependency with control, influence with necessity. And when the truth hits, that you didn't need them, never needed them, and probably never will, they experience the slow, grinding shock of irrelevance. Making you an enemy may have been their first mistake. Believing you needed them at all is the one that writes their chapter in history as a cautionary tale. The person they dismissed as dependent is the one who walked away untouched, leaving them scrambling to understand the consequences of their own assumptions. Number 5, they attacked your character because they couldn't compete with your consistency. People don't usually target what they can't beat. They target what they can't understand. Consistency is quiet, almost invisible, and extremely intimidating to those built on chaos, shortcuts, or luck. They see your unwavering habits, your steady progress, your discipline, and it terrifies them because it exposes their own instability. When someone attacks your character, it's rarely about truth. It's about fear. The fear that no amount of noise, manipulation, or lies can touch the structure you've quietly built over time. Consistency forces people to face a reality they dislike. Success, respect, and influence are not products of charm or chance. They come from showing up repeatedly, keeping promises to yourself when no one is watching, and executing in ways that can't be faked. You don't stumble once and recover. You maintain, adapt, and push forward. That's a threat to anyone whose victories are temporary or whose identity depends on others' perception. Because you aren't collapsing under pressure, they feel compelled to break you through narrative instead. They smear, gossip, and fabricate not because you gave them reason, but because they can't bear that you exist untouched by their chaos. The irony is brutal. By attacking your character, they're admitting defeat in the only arena that matters, the one you dominate effortlessly. Their aggression is a confession disguised as malice. They can't compete with results, so they target the perception. They hope words will topple what time and discipline have built. But consistency doesn't waver. It doesn't flinch. It doesn't answer every insult or justify every assumption. And the more they try to force you into reaction, the clearer it becomes that their actions are weak, desperate, and entirely predictable. Eventually, this exposes them far more than it ever could expose you. While they're burning energy on narratives, you're advancing steady and unshaken. The contrast is devastating because it shows the truth plainly. The person who cannot be destabilized by noise is the one who cannot be defeated. Their attacks aren't a threat, they're evidence. Evidence that you're untouchable in ways they will never understand, and that their greatest weapon, malice, only highlights their own impotence. Number 6. They didn't realize that betrayal is the fastest way to activate your highest intelligence. Betrayal hits differently when you're not naive. It doesn't break you. It awakens something sharper, faster, and more precise than before. People who betray assume it's a moment of advantage, a power play that will tilt the balance in their favor. What they don't understand is that when someone with vision and patience is betrayed, the experience isn't wasted on resentment. It's converted into insight. Every slight, every lie, every broken trust becomes data, a lesson in human behavior, a blueprint for how to navigate future storms. The irony is that betrayal is often the spark for transformation. It forces you to see who truly belongs in your life and who was just occupying space. It teaches clarity that comfort never could. People betray because they miscalculate, because they think you're pliable or unaware. In doing so, they reveal their character in full, often faster than months or years of observation could achieve. That revelation is a gift disguised as pain, one that allows you to adjust, protect, and ultimately strategize with an intelligence honed by experience. There's also a kind of elegance in the way betrayal triggers growth. While others might react impulsively, shouting, confronting, or lashing out, the person who understands the game waits. They watch, they plan, and they recalibrate. Their mind becomes a silent battlefield where moves are anticipated, weaknesses are catalogued, and the next phase of evolution is already in motion. The betrayer may have intended to destabilize, but they've only activated a level of awareness they never could have triggered through honesty or transparency. In the end, betrayal is less about the moment it happens and more about what it unlocks. Those who act with malice think they're gaining ground, but they're planting the seeds of their own exposure. The person betrayed doesn't waste energy on revenge. They convert, elevate, and fortify. Intelligence sharpened by betrayal is not reactive. It's strategic, subtle, and lethal in ways that only time can reveal. By underestimating the person they've hurt, betrayers fail to see that the very act intended to weaken them is the catalyst that ensures they will never be able to harm you again in the same way. Number 7, they thought karma was mystical, not mechanical. Most people think karma is poetic justice, a mystical force that appears out of nowhere to punish the wicked. That's the fantasy. The reality is far more terrifying and precise. Karma is purely mechanical, the natural result of action and consequence over time. People who underestimate it treat others recklessly, believing their deeds are too clever, their lies too small, or their manipulation too subtle to matter. They assume consequences are optional or delayed indefinitely, not realizing that life doesn't forget. It balances quietly and inexorably, like a machine running on cause and effect. Karma doesn't need a gavel or a spotlight. It doesn't deliver punishments according to drama or emotion. It is impartial, systematic, and relentless. Every action a person takes, every betrayal, every misuse of trust, every underestimation, stores energy that eventually finds its target. The dangerous part is that this doesn't feel immediate. It grows slowly, invisibly, like pressure building behind a dam. People mistake delay for immunity. They ignore patterns because the consequences haven't yet arrived, forgetting that the mechanical nature of reality doesn't care about timing, only about outcome. Those who act against chosen ones often think they can outrun repercussions through cunning, charm, or temporary advantage. What they fail to see is that their own design, reckless arrogance, short-sightedness, and underestimation has already aligned them for failure. The system doesn't hurry, but it doesn't stop. It doesn't forgive, but it doesn't gloat. It simply executes with precision and inevitability. The brilliance of mechanical karma is that it exposes arrogance for what it is. It doesn't play favorites, and it doesn't need witnesses. People who believed they were untouchable discover too late that they created the very circumstances that destroy them. They confuse luck for skill, timing for control, and temporary advantage for permanence. But life, like a well-oiled machine, eventually delivers exactly what they engineered through their own hands. They thought karma was mystical. They didn't realize it was methodical, and by the time they notice, the outcome is already unavoidable. Number 8, they failed to understand that chosen ones don't seek revenge. They outgrow relevance. Revenge is noisy. It's predictable, reactive, and visible to everyone. Most people assume that when someone is wronged, they'll lash out, make threats, or orchestrate some dramatic payback. That's how stories are told, movies are written, and egos are fed. But chosen ones operate differently. They don't need to prove a point or teach a lesson. They simply continue evolving, silently leaving behind anyone who doesn't belong in their growth trajectory. What terrifies others isn't the threat of retaliation. It's the quiet disappearance of importance. When someone makes the mistake of thinking they can harm a chosen one and matter afterward, they are ignoring the natural law of evolution. You don't become someone who outgrows relevance overnight. It's a process built on self-awareness, discipline, and a refusal to let temporary conflicts dictate your trajectory. While others are busy making noise about offenses, plotting revenge, or obsessing over small victories, you are ascending. Your focus is not revenge, it's progress, refinement, and preservation of energy. Every insult or attack becomes less a wound and more a stepping stone. This is what makes chosen ones so unassailable. The people who think they have power over them are operating under a false assumption that their presence matters. In reality, relevance is earned, maintained, and protected. When someone loses your respect, trust, or attention, they aren't being punished. They are simply being phased out of the orbit of someone who operates on a higher plane. The irony is exquisite. The very people who tried to dominate, manipulate, or harm you spend energy obsessing over your reaction while you've already moved past them. Outgrowing relevance is subtle, devastating, and final. It leaves no room for negotiation, apology, or reconciliation if the offender wasn't worth the effort in the first place. It's not about cruelty, it's about efficiency. Making someone irrelevant is a masterstroke that doesn't scream or threaten. It just exists as a quiet truth, leaving those who underestimated you to grapple with the reality that their significance was never yours to grant. They tried to matter. You moved past that, and in doing so, you demonstrated a level of power they will never truly understand. Number 9, they believed power was loud, forgetting that real power moves without permission. Most people define power by volume, visibility, or approval. They think power announces itself, dominates conversations, or demands attention. That's the power they recognize, the flashy kind, the kind that seeks validation in eyes that don't matter. But true power doesn't ask for recognition. It doesn't need applause. It moves silently, deliberately, and with intention. Those who mistake noise for strength are blind to the forces quietly reshaping everything around them. They see flamboyance and assume dominance, completely unaware that the quiet ones are already several steps ahead. Real power is invisible until it acts. It doesn't explain itself, justify its choices, or plead for understanding. It exists in decisions made without anyone noticing, in strategies formed without broadcast, in boundaries set without argument. The danger of real power is that it cannot be bargained with or intimidated. People who try to provoke it are simply learning, often too late, that influence does not require consent. Power that moves quietly forces the world to adjust around it rather than the other way around. The arrogance of thinking power is loud is what gets people destroyed. They overreach, miscalculate, and expose themselves, believing the rules of display apply universally. While they are busy projecting dominance, real power is building, calculating, and strengthening in ways that don't require validation. It doesn't compete. It simply exists. And when it acts, it rewrites the equation entirely. This is why those who underestimate it fail to survive its consequences. They treat the absence of noise as absence of threat, forgetting that influence can operate without spectators and that authority does not need permission to manifest. By the time the world realizes who truly holds power, it's irreversible. Those who relied on spectacle discover that their actions, once aimed at controlling others, only highlight their own impotence. Power that moves without permission doesn't just outlast opponents, it exposes them, leaving their loudness as nothing more than a testament to their own misunderstanding of what strength really is. Number 10. They assumed you would break under pressure, not realizing pressure is your native language. Some people live in constant fear of pressure, mistakes, or failure. They equate stress with collapse and assume everyone else functions the same way. That's where they miscalculate you. Pressure doesn't weaken you, it awakens you. It's the environment in which you thrive, the conditions that sharpen focus and reveal clarity. While others crumble, panic, or make reckless decisions, you operate calmly, deliberately, and strategically. They see tension and assume vulnerability. They see intensity and mistake it for panic. They couldn't be more wrong. Pressure teaches a certain kind of intelligence. It forces you to process faster, prioritize better, and act with intention rather than impulse. You've been through enough scenarios where stakes were high, outcomes uncertain, and people around you unreliable. Those experiences aren't scars, they're training grounds. While others panic, you calculate. While they react, you respond. They think the weight of circumstance will bend you, but you carry it naturally because you've already internalized the rhythm of high-stakes situations. What makes this terrifying for anyone trying to challenge you is predictability cloaked in unpredictability. They believe chaos will rattle you, when in reality, you've spent years mastering it. Pressure isn't a threat, it's an amplifier. It reveals weaknesses in others while highlighting your own strengths. They throw intensity at you thinking it will fracture you, and it only serves to demonstrate how unshakable you truly are. By the time they realize that their attempts to break you have failed, the advantage has already shifted. You're not just surviving, you're advancing. You're not just enduring, you're leveraging every ounce of pressure to refine strategy, fortify boundaries, and accelerate growth. Their belief that you would falter under strain is a fatal misjudgment, a blind spot in their perception of strength. They assumed the weight would crush you, not realizing it already shapes you. In that miscalculation lies their undoing. You are composed in chaos, focused in fire, and unbreakable by the very forces they believed would destroy you. Number 11. They thought disrespect would humble you, not awaken your boundaries. Disrespect is a test, and most people approach it thinking it's a challenge to be endured or ignored. They assume that if they push hard enough, provoke enough, or demean enough, they can bend someone to their will. That's where they fail. For the person who understands their own value, disrespect doesn't intimidate. It clarifies. Every slight becomes a signal, every insult a marker of limits. It's not the trigger for compliance. It's the alarm that tells you exactly where and how to protect yourself. When someone disrespects you, it exposes their perception of power, not yours. They assume that because they act without regard, you must be weak or impressionable. But boundaries aren't formed in moments of comfort. They are forged in confrontation and challenge. Disrespect isn't a blow to absorb. It's an opportunity to recalibrate. You learn who can occupy your space, who deserves your attention, and who will be quietly removed from your orbit. It teaches discernment, patience, and most importantly, self-respect. The real danger for those who disrespect is that they underestimate how precise boundaries can be when enforced with calm and finality. You don't react impulsively or theatrically. You adjust, limit access, and protect energy in ways that are invisible but devastating in effect. The person who believed disrespect could weaken you is blindsided not by anger, but by the removal of their influence entirely. They expected chaos. They received calculated detachment. There's an elegance in that kind of power. You don't need to argue, justify, or explain. The consequences of crossing the line are inherent in your absence, in the closure of doors, in the refusal to engage with those who fail to respect what is yours. Disrespect was meant to challenge you. Instead, it sharpened your instincts and fortified your rules. Those who assumed it could humble you are left grappling with their own miscalculation, realizing too late that boundaries, once activated, are not negotiable. Disrespect doesn't teach you humility. It teaches others their limits, and you become the silent enforcer of lessons they never wanted to learn. Number 12. They forgot that integrity compounds faster than manipulation. Integrity is quiet, steady, and often underestimated by those who rely on shortcuts, lies, or manipulation to get ahead. People who manipulate assume it works in the long term, that small tricks and temporary wins are enough to maintain influence. What they fail to realize is that integrity builds momentum that no deception can touch. It compounds silently over time, creating a foundation so strong that it cannot be shaken by noise, envy, or petty schemes. While manipulators are constantly defending their false narratives, someone grounded in integrity continues moving forward, unaffected and unstoppable. The irony is brutal. Manipulators believe they are clever, that their actions are invisible, and that the truth can be bent to fit their convenience. Meanwhile, every dishonest act adds weight to a record they cannot erase. People notice over time, not always immediately, but inevitably. Integrity has a way of revealing itself in the consistency of actions, the reliability of decisions, and the clarity of judgment. Those who choose shortcuts may win battles, but they lose the war because the truth, like gravity, always asserts itself. When someone underestimates integrity, they mistake patience and composure for naivety. They believe they can bend or break someone who simply refuses to compromise principles. But integrity doesn't need to defend itself. It doesn't argue, manipulate, or justify. It exists as a standard, and its effects compound with every choice, every action, and every refusal to conform to mediocrity or dishonesty. Over time, the difference becomes undeniable. This is why people who rely on manipulation always fall behind. They are trapped in a cycle of immediate gains with no lasting foundation, while integrity quietly strengthens influence, trust, and authority. The person who operates with integrity doesn't just survive chaos, they thrive in it. Their reputation, relationships, and power grow naturally, while manipulators scramble to maintain control that is already slipping through their fingers. Integrity compounds faster than manipulation because it is not dependent on the approval or ignorance of others. It is self-sustaining, unshakable, and inevitably victorious. Those who fail to respect it learn too late that no scheme, lie, or deception can overpower the momentum of a life lived with unwavering principle. Number 13. They didn't realize that once you detach emotionally, the outcome is already decided. Emotional detachment is often misunderstood as coldness or indifference, but for someone who knows their own worth, it's a form of control. People who depend on emotional reactions to manipulate, intimidate, or maintain power assume that tension, anger, or persuasion can sway you. What they fail to see is that once you detach, the battlefield has already shifted. Their strategies, their manipulations, and their attempts to provoke are rendered irrelevant because you no longer play by their rules. You're not reacting, you're observing, calculating, and executing with clarity. Detachment doesn't happen overnight. It's built through experience, reflection, and understanding who deserves influence over your life and who does not. When you disengage emotionally, you stop validating attempts to destabilize you. You stop giving weight to actions designed to provoke fear, guilt, or insecurity. That absence of reaction is not weakness, it's finality. The person who thought their behavior could affect you is suddenly stripped of power, and their assumptions collapse silently but decisively. The power of detachment is subtle but devastating. People who relied on your engagement to maintain control are blindsided when the responses they expected never come. Their energy, time, and resources are wasted on a version of you that no longer exists, the version that once cared enough to respond. By the time they realize it, the consequences are already in motion. Opportunities they thought they had to influence you are gone, and their position relative to you has shifted permanently. Detachment also sharpens perception. Without emotional bias clouding judgment, you see motives, patterns, and weaknesses with unflinching clarity. Decisions become strategic rather than reactive, and outcomes align with long-term vision rather than short-term satisfaction. The moment they miscalculated your attachment, they sealed their own fate. Making you an enemy after that point isn't just dangerous, it's inconsequential to you. They discover too late that emotional independence is a force stronger than retaliation, louder than threats, and unbreakable in its precision. Once you detach, the game is over, and they've already lost without realizing it. Number 14. They will eventually understand that making you an enemy was never the mistake. Losing your respect was. People often confuse conflict with power, thinking that creating an enemy is the ultimate act of control. They assume that hostility alone can intimidate, destabilize, or manipulate someone into compliance. What they fail to grasp is that the real power lies in respect. Making someone an enemy is a surface-level move, loud and noticeable, but ultimately inconsequential if respect has already been compromised. Once your respect is lost, everything else, the fights, the arguments, the attempts to dominate, becomes irrelevant. They discover too late that respect is the true foundation of influence, and without it, their actions are powerless. Respect isn't granted lightly. It's earned through observation, consistency, and character. People who betray trust, manipulate outcomes, or act recklessly assume their actions won't have long-term consequences. They think intimidation and aggression can substitute for integrity and understanding. The reality is that those who have cultivated self-worth, awareness, and discernment recognize these tactics instantly. Losing respect isn't a momentary lapse. It's a recognition that the person they assumed they could control has already removed them from positions of influence. At that point, their aggression, their plots, and their presence have no effect. They exist only in a space they once hoped to dominate. The brilliance of lost respect is its quiet finality. It doesn't scream or retaliate. It simply shifts the balance. The person who was underestimated continues building, evolving, and advancing without wasting energy on the noise of someone who is no longer significant. The former aggressor is left scrambling, trying to reclaim relevance that was never theirs to hold. Their realization comes too late. They thought they were making an impact by creating conflict, but they had already lost the one thing that could have mattered: respect. In the end, making an enemy is fleeting. Losing respect is permanent. Those who assumed hostility would define the outcome find themselves powerless, irrelevant, and exposed. The person they aim to break is unaffected, having removed their influence long before the battle even began. Respect, once withdrawn, cannot be bought, begged, or forced back. And that is the ultimate lesson for anyone foolish enough to miscalculate its weight. In the end, the truth is clear. Underestimating someone who is disciplined, self-aware, and unapologetically aligned with their own path is the gravest mistake anyone can make. Every slight, every betrayal, every attempt to intimidate or manipulate becomes a lesson, a strategy, and a reminder that true power doesn't announce itself, and real influence cannot be bought or coerced. Those who think they can control, break, or diminish a chosen one are always the ones who miscalculate, because patience, consistency, integrity, and detachment are forces far stronger than noise, anger, or aggression. The world doesn't crumble for the loudest voices. It bends for those who move deliberately, who respect themselves, and who understand that respect, boundaries, and self-mastery are the ultimate currencies of life. Every act against someone like this eventually circles back, not as random chance, not as poetic justice, but as the natural consequence of arrogance and misjudgment. The person underestimated doesn't need revenge. They don't need drama. They continue to rise, evolve, and outlast, leaving those who tried to harm them scrambling in the aftermath of their own poor choices. History favors clarity, patience, and the kind of intelligence that thrives under pressure, remembers every detail, and acts without unnecessary emotion. Those who thought they had power discover, too late, that the real power was never theirs to claim. So remember this: making the wrong enemy isn't your problem, it's theirs. Losing your respect isn't just a momentary loss, it's permanent. And anyone who thought they could disrupt your path without consequence is only highlighting their own miscalculation. If this message resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and join the movement of clarity and self-mastery. Like the video, comment your thoughts, and share it with anyone who needs to understand the weight of respect, boundaries, and true influence. This isn't just a lesson, it's a wake-up call, and the world needs more people who recognize it. Stay awakened, chosen ones.